Dynamic input allows you to work with the crosshair. Now, dynamic input again is controlled by the drafting settings on the status bar. It's this one here. Dynamic input off, dynamic input on. I normally leave it on. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to copy this object here, the 3D solid. So what I'm going to do is click on it, right click, and on the shortcut menu, I'm going to select copy selection. Then prompts me for a base point. Now, you'll notice with the dynamic input on, it's prompting me specify base point next to the crosshair there. It's also specifying base point down here on the command line. If I switch dynamic input off, you'll see that there's no prompt on the crosshair. Dynamic input on, the dynamic input is there next to the crosshair. Always try and use your dynamic input all the time. I am just using the default dynamic input settings in AutoCAD. I very rarely change them from the default settings. So the base point is going to be my center snap there, left click. Now as I move away, can you see that there? It's prompting me for the second point that I need to use. If I type an @ symbol, like that, it then does that relative to the last point selected. So if I type in -1000, like that, and then do a comma, and then do 500, like that, that's positive up in the y-axis, and press enter, it pops a copy of my object there. Now I need to do another one coming from the same point. So I'm going to type an @ again, or am I? It'll be relative to the last point selected. Let's just check that. So it's @, and then I'm going to do -1000 again, and this time comma or tab, and then -500 to go down on the y-axis and press enter. As you can see, it's working from the same origin point right here. So I now press enter, and what I've done is I've copied two more 3D solids. Now they do actually clash with each other slightly there. That's purely my fault. Don't worry about that at all. What we can do is we can move them now again using dynamic input. So if I click on this object here, right click and move, and I use the base point, the center point there, and I come vertically upwards now using my polar tracking, which is switched on. That's this one down here, polar tracking, make sure it's on. I come vertically upwards, and all I've got to do is type in a distance now using dynamic input. I'm going to move that upwards by 75. See, the dynamic input kicks in as soon as I type. I press enter. That moves that one upwards by 75. I select this object, right click and move on the shortcut menu, center snap and track vertically downwards. Again, dynamic input 75, no minus required, and enter. So they're now not touching each other. So that's using your dynamic input. Notice I did not use the command line at all. It was all off the dynamic input with the dynamic input switched on.